All right. So welcome to the Girls Club. That's episode number 9. And today we're talking about the principles and the value of self-defense. So both physical and spiritual self-defense and what that means to us. And today we have a special guest, Chris Jantzen, who has his own website podcast called EndEvil.com. Is that it, Chris?
It's EndEvil.life, the
End
End Evil podcast. Yeah.
Yeah, EndEvil.life. So, and he also hosts the One Great Work
One
Warriors.
Great Work Warriors. Yeah.
So, thank you, Chris, for joining us today. And if you want to introduce yourself for a minute, and then we can go from there.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me. I've been enjoying seeing the Girls Club on social media, and I've been doing the podcast thing for about 3 years with the End Evil podcast. And then a few years before that, I had another podcast that I ran for a few years. So I've been doing this stuff for a little while now. But especially really turned a corner in my life because of back, I guess, looking at 9/11 and got interested in weather engineering, and those things just kind of rocked my world and opened up the door for me to really start asking serious questions about freedom and what does freedom mean. And I've always been a spiritual dude. I grew up in Christianity and then had to kind of reject it at about age 19 and realized that I didn't want to be part of any religion like that. But I always came back to, I do understand that there's this core God, great intelligence, the mother, the great mother. I always really like kind of like how the native people talked about it, like, Mother Nature, the great mother spirit, the great spirit. I always still held on to that. And then when I came across Mark Passio's work, it just kind of like put it all back together and helped me understand why so many things in this world don't make sense, because most people are living in a world that is mostly doing things in an evil manner and kind of like accepting it as okay and calling it good. And that really creates this situation where we're dealing with things being really kind of backwards and weird and not making sense. But when I was able to kind of like look at all the conspiratorial stuff and then look at all the occult secrets and look at my own understanding of what this whole reality is, it all made sense with natural law. And I've been talking about natural law and freedom ever since. And, you know, self-defense is one of the biggest topics that's not covered enough. It's like a huge percentage, 50% of the work we need to be doing as individuals. And so I'm excited to talk about it today. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. And I'm just really excited and happy that we're 9 months in, we're 9 episodes in, and not every episode has had a guest, because it's the girls club. But sometimes we do have really great guests, and all of them have been on. And last month we had Brian Easterday on, which we started thinking, having Chris on and talking about self-defense is a great follow-up to that. So guys, go and check that last episode out too if you haven't already, um, and find all the links. But this month, now we're seeing Chris Jantzen and his work, and we're going to go through some of our reading and history like we usually do. And any thoughts from anybody before we move into the reading?
Jump right in, Sarah.
Okay. So, all right. You see that okay? Okay, so this month we are the Girls Club, July number 9, the values of self-defense. with our special guest, Chris Jantzen. And you can find his link here. His tap link is here. This will be in the description as usual, guys. Oops. So that's the whole tap link. And before we start into the reading, we can check out this video. Okay.
Yeah.
Wing Chun is a kung fu system which originated in the famous Shaolin temples of southern China. Wing Chun is unique in that it is the only martial art to have been devised by a woman. Its founder, Ying Mei, was a Buddhist nun in the early 1700s and was widely regarded as one of the top 5 fighters of her time. According to legend, one day Ying Mei was out walking and witnessed a battle between a stork and a rodent. Ying Mei was impressed by the way the stork defended itself, using its wings and feet while simultaneously attacking. She decided to adapt these techniques and principles to the human frame, and so formulated a new fighting system, one which did not rely on the person being big and strong. Ying Mei befriended a young girl named Yim Wing Chun, who was being forced into marriage without her consent. An agreement was made that the girl could marry the man of her choice on the condition that she could defeat her betrothed in combat. After a year of training under Ying Mei, Yim Wing Chun was able to defeat her opponent and win her freedom. Ying Mei later named her new martial arts style Wing Chun after her first student, who in turn continued the tradition of passing the principles and forms to the next generation.
So we're looking at a martial art that's based on a logical set of principles and biomechanics of the human body. First, it works on the centerline theory, utilising the centerline of the body. One half of the body fits to here, one to there. Once they start crossing, the muscle groups break down. On the centerline as well, you find all your organs. So therefore it's the most vital points to protect and to attack to. Going into principles, practicality, simplicity, directness, economy of movement and minimum use of strength are the whole system is based on. Practicality has to be practical, nice and easy to use. We don't use any high kicking, we keep everything nice and low. Therefore you can do it in walking, do it in standing. You don't need to jump into any big stances for it. Simplicity, we want to keep it very simple for the fact that too much energy, too much time consuming small people such as myself, if I have to do a lot of fancy work, it's just too much. Direct, we utilise the centerline principle. So the straight line between 2 points is a centerline, the most direct route. Also at the same time we simultaneous attack and defend. So we're direct to the force, the line of force, and direct to our strike as well. Economy of movement utilises the same ideas. We want to use less movement to gain more. Minimum use of strength. Your mass accelerated equals force. So we're trying to drop as much of the body mass to create force rather than relying on brute force.
Yip Man was a Wing Chun master who fled China to Hong Kong in 1948 when the communist government banned the study of all martial arts. In Hong Kong, Yip Man taught many thousands of students. However, there were 4 who were taught behind closed doors in a traditional master-student relationship. The longest serving of these students was Choi Shong Tin, who would later take over Yip Man's classes. Jim Fung began learning Wing Chun at 14 years of age under Choi Shong Tin. It was Jim Fung who brought Wing Chun to Australia, when in 1973 he established Jim Fung's Wing Chun Academy in Adelaide. Today his school is world renowned and is included in the All China Martial Arts Register, one of only a few schools outside of China to receive this accolade. The school has classes targeted at all age groups and skill levels, including classes especially for women.
People often ask what makes Wing Chun so good for women, and there are many reasons, but the main reason is that it was developed by a woman. The other great thing about Wing Chun is that it helps the individual to think about the body, how we use the body, and how we can use it better to avoid even getting into a physical confrontation. So the Wing Chun stance, which is one of balance and evenness and uprightness, means that the individual presents a much more confident and in control image, and that alone can be enough to deter an attacker. We learn in Wing Chun to use our entire body mass behind every movement that we have, so we're not relying on the size of our biceps, triceps, back muscles or leg muscles, but we use all of those focused at one point in order to generate power. The simple direct movements also make it ideal for street situations. So we learn to use our voice, much more so than perhaps the men would. Using verbal defence can be just as effective, if not more so, than having to rely on your physical skills. And so the women are taught to be able to stand well, have a confident posture, be prepared to put their hands up, set boundaries, create a fence around their body where it's quite clear that that fence shouldn't be crossed, and say with an assertive tone, no, or back off. So Wing Chun teaches that purely in the stance and the guard, that you're not just preparing yourself for a 300-year-old martial art, but you're preparing yourself for any street situation where somebody might be just trying to cross your boundaries. And that's part of the reason why it's so fantastic for women to learn, whether the person is looking for self-defense, whether it's fitness, or whether it's the art of Wing Chun Kung Fu.
The name Wing Chun means everlasting springtime, and as the name suggests, it is an art form that is continually evolving and growing, but as it's passed down through the generations, it remains true to the legacy of Eng Mei.
All right, guys, so that was just a little short documentary video that Chris found for us, so we wanted to play it. And it's like, I had watched it earlier and it was pretty informative, and it got me into doing a little bit more research about who the original creator of this fighting style is. So to go back into our share screen. Okay, so Ning Mei, yeah, I'm probably butchering that, but she was a Buddhist nun founded. You can now see this, right? You can all see it.
Yeah.
Okay. So Ning Mei, a Buddhist nun, founded Wing Chun martial arts style during the Qing dynasty of the early 1700s. She also created dragon-style kung fu, white crane, and the 5-pattern Hung Kuang. The Ip Man brought Wing Chun to Hong Kong as well as the rest of the world. His most famous student was Bruce Lee. So some history reference. One of the references I was looking at was on Wikipedia. Ning Mei, who was born in 1703, is said to have been one of the legendary 5 elders, survivors of the destruction of the Shaolin Temple by the Qing dynasty. According to legend, she is said to have been a master of various martial arts, including the Shaolin martial arts, the Wudang martial arts, the Nanjing Kung Fu, and I don't think I can pronounce that, but
Jiu Quan.
yeah. And the family style of Yu Fei. She is also credited as the founder of the martial arts Wu Mei Pei, Wing Chun Dragon Style 5-pattern Hung Kuan. She has been associated with various locations, including the Shaolin Temple in either Henan or Fujian, the Wudang Mountains in Hubei, Mount Imai in Sichuan, a supposed White Crane Temple at the Liang Mountains on the border between Shaiyuan and Yunnan, and additional locations in Juanzi and Guangdong. So anybody who is from those regions, just forgive my pronunciations. It's English and bad English in America, folks. According to one folk story, she was the daughter of a Ming general. So that's some history on the creator of this particular style. And it seems like she has quite a lot of other things that she's done in her time of history. And we actually covered this a little bit earlier in an earlier episode about when we were covering feminism last month and talking about how, you know, people have this idea that women didn't do things up until recently in the modern world, which we know is entirely incorrect. Fan fiction, you know, maybe cultures and this and that here and there had these things sewn into all of the world at the time, but women did things, and they did extraordinary things even as back as 1700s and before that. And I think last month we actually talked about women who stood on their own as far back as, you know, 700 or 1,600 years ago, and it goes all the way back to like BC eras even. So it's quite, when I started reading about her, and I was like, we've got to add this into our episode this month, because I just think it's amazing that, you know, she's another prime example of, you know, people just being people and using that creative you know, instinct that we all have, and using, you know, man's intervention to manifest something into the world, using that inspiration, you know, all those little fractions of spirit we all have within us. So, before we move on to the next little bit, does anybody have some thoughts on that or anything you might want to add?
Chris, go for it.
If you guys haven't seen the Ip Man movies, I really enjoyed the whole series. All those movies are great. And there's one particular thing that Ip Man says somewhere in the movies, and he describes it as benevolence. And that word really stuck with me. And the gentleman who's really taught me a lot of the self-defense I've learned in the last 2 years has told me that through the years, learning self-defense and understanding these things on a deep level helps him to be a better person and helps him to like people better, you know. And he says he never has to worry about a certain amount of things, you know, like, and that's what Ip Man described as benevolence. If you're confident in your physical form in the world, and you don't have to feel afraid of people and what they may or may not try to do to you, then you can be a lot sweeter of a person if you're not even a little bit scared of them, you know? And I haven't quite reached that level of not even being a little bit scared, but I do think it's really important. And the more I've learned about self-defense, the more I've realized just how important it is to train on a daily or weekly basis regularly to prepare yourself for situations that you may run into or you may not run into. It still reflects in our confidence and the way we move and the way we think and the way we feel about ourselves. So I love the story I've always loved the story of the female who started Wing Chun, and one of the most deadly martial arts out there, you know, and it's just amazing. Bruce Lee learned from Ip Man, who, you know, studied from Wing Chun. So Bruce Lee trained through, I think, many different martial art types with another man named Dan Santo. I don't think I'm saying his name quite right. Dan Inosanto. And Dan trained my teacher. So he's actually punched some of the same punching bags that they had out there for Bruce Lee, and says it's true what they say. Bruce Lee was an amazing martial artist and athlete. But when we get a little deeper in, I would like to make a distinction between self-defense and martial arts. But I don't know if we're that deep in yet, so I'll pass it on for now.
I had a question about what you're learning. How much is Wing Chun influencing that, and what other styles are influencing what you're learning?
It is one of the fundamental aspects that has affected, but the main style, if you wanted to look it up, if someone wanted to spend a little time on YouTube, I would recommend looking up modern Arnis, Arnis. And what I'm learning is basically called weapons self-defense, in the simplest way. And that is because, it's great. The distinction I'm making between martial arts and self-defense. Martial arts can be a beautiful, amazing thing where you can do flips in the air and swing silver things around and be able to handle all kinds of fancy moves or techniques or forms. But that doesn't always translate into being able to actually defend yourself or defend an innocent. And a lot of times the more effective way to defend yourself or another person is with a weapon. And so why would you just do fancy moves with your body if there's sticks nearby or tools you could use? Because self-defense is about surviving. It's not about looking good or showing off your skills. Not to say those don't help. But I hope that clears up that.
I think it's a helpful distinction. I was involved in Taekwondo for many years, but it was very much a sport context, and we trained and we did form, but it was very geared towards competition and pumse, the fighting. So yeah, it wasn't as practical for the self-defense. But I will say that when I was young, because I started it when I was 13, that early on, there was a certain shift that happened in my countenance and my confidence. And I remember going to a beach, in New Jersey beach, with my family. And I was pretty brave, whatever. My parents let me wander around and I just would wander off on my own. And was down the beach by myself as the sun was setting. And I had this instinct, and I looked and there was a young man walking along the parallel to the ocean, right? And I just had a bad feeling. And I remember tuning into that bad feeling. And I don't know why I had that bad feeling, but I was like, I need to watch. And sure enough, the guy started walking down right directly towards me. And I remember it was very strange. I just stood in like this stance of power, and looked him in the eye, and he went to like grab me or something. And I just like blocked him, a high block and a low block. I was like, no. And I looked at him and I was like really confident. And he just it was actually a young, like a teenage guy, and he ran away. And I just, that whole idea of the confidence, like the woman was saying in the video, of like your posture and your voice. And I think, when you do training, that is one of the most important things you can develop. Hopefully not overconfidence, right? So you learn like the difference. And maybe you could share a little bit about that.
Well, I'm really curious, first off, just to kind of ask you guys a question. I'm kind of curious for each of you in your life, what does self-defense mean to you so far? How important does it seem to you in your day-to-day life? And how do you feel out in public?
So personally, self-defense to me means protection. I have 3 years of judo under my belt. I was a green belt, and they won't even teach you offensive moves in judo until you get to brown belt. And then I also took 3 years of Chinese Kenpo and a year of Chinese stick fighting. It's called Kali. And I 100% agree with you, Leslie. Like, there's some kind of confidence, in a certain situation, you know, it might be nerve-wracking for me. It'd be like if a group of people came towards me and I had my kids around, because that's like, oh God, I can only be in one place at a time. Um, but to me, it is like safety. So, self-defense is protection, it's safety, it's security, it's confidence, it's well, safety, the ability to move through most situations safely. And um I started my training when I was 13. Um, and I was definitely a lot less confident before then. And yeah, there's just something about it. I can't really speak from the place of like not knowing what it's like, but I do feel like if most women could protect themselves, the Me Too movement, the whole victimhood, you know, use it as an opportunity to rag on men and stuff, I don't think that would have happened, because I really think that if women were trained appropriately, they could handle themselves. And Leslie, like you said, you know, when that guy kind of like reached out to get you, like I'm 5 foot tall, maybe 100 pounds. I have little baby wrists. A lot of guys would like to come and grab my wrists, and Kempo um teaches me close hand combat. They also did a lot of the katas and the forms, but those were less for show, and it was actually to prepare you for multiple assailants. And it painted a cool picture. If I painted my feet and did the kata movements on the ground, you know, it's all kind of cool. Um, but I don't think a lot of women would have the safety issues if they knew how to keep themselves safe, because there is just something about protection, and I don't know who I would be without that. I've been able to get out of wrist locks too, and to see a guy be like, whoa, and he's got like 150 pounds on me, it's like, yeah, dude, don't fucking grab me. There's just something about knowing how to keep yourself safe during risky situations that it's just like it resolved a lot of my anxiety, is knowing I'm safe.
Yeah.
That is beautiful. So good to hear. You know, it's not as common that most people don't do nearly the type of training you've done. So that's really good to hear.
Well, I don't do it anymore. I'm more like a rusty knife, but even a rusty knife will deal a heavy dose of tetanus. So it's like, you know, might be rusty, but I haven't lost all my stuff yet.
Well, I hope
Right.
today's talk will inspire you to, you know, kind of pick that rusty knife back up and shine it a little bit.
I think so. I have been working out actually consistently for the first time in years, and that's a cool thing about martial arts. You might fall off a little bit, but once you do something repeatedly, that becomes sense memory. And when you become in those situations that call for stuff like that, it's like riding a bike. You know, your sense memory kicks in and you still know what to do. You still know how to handle it. And I would love to go back to a dojo, honestly. I would. It's fun.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, I talk about that all the time. Muscle memory, it kicks in like once you have something kind of in you, especially if you picked it up, you know, the earlier the better. Like, you know, people have stuff ingrained in them from when they were 1, 2, 3 years old. And it's muscle memory. It's because, you know,
Yes.
we absorbed it and we don't really ever forget anything. So I talk about that all the time. I usually end up calling it muscle memory because it's um, you know, easy for people to, you know, usually, you know, in like my knitting class, you know, it's easy for them to understand that really quickly as like, but sense memory, that's the exact same thing. So yeah, I mean, you could probably walk into a dojo and like the instructor would probably be like, "Oh, you actually know more than I was expecting." And you know, I think that's, you know, always a nice surprise for people. But I think for self-defense, I think it's encouraging to hear when, you know, even when like, you know, fathers are putting out the initiative to enroll their daughter or encourage their daughter into something like self-defense, any kind of self-defense type of class, or just educate them on self-defense generally. Like this is, I would say, part of what I would feel is like in the physical manifestation, man's realm of responsibilities, the home part of the hearth, which we've talked about in the past. So I feel like, you know, not just their daughters. I mean, they will more so, I think, focus on their daughters, men who do this, because they know the boys are probably going to pick it up just by watching fathers do it, and that happens quite often. So, um, I mean, for instance, I have one of my knitting students came in, and she's a young girl, and her father brings her in to knitting class, and he sits there with her, and while I teach her how to knit and crochet, and we were talking. He teaches her how to grill, how to fish. He takes her to sell, like she's in some kind of martial arts class. This is I'm just like, I was just kind of floored for a minute when they were telling me a little bit about themselves, and I'm like, this is the kind of thing, and this is why I encourage people to go out there, out in the real world, talk to your community, even as annoying as it could be sometimes, and really see what is really happening out there. Like, there are people out there who are still just going about being human and doing things regular. And, you know, we get all wrapped up in what's going on online, or the TV tells us this is happening or this is happening. And then, like, we forget that this is controlled. This is a controlled thing that we're experiencing here. So that, I mean, even you could acknowledging this aspect of our environment is a form of self-defense in and of itself, because you're looking at something and going, okay, how much of this is accurate? How much of this is true? How much of this is exaggerated? Who owns this media network that I'm listening to currently? You know, you know, and doing that kind of discernment, you know, channeling that inner Dick Tracy, that we have, and really like figuring out what's real and what isn't real. So, and that's a personal responsibility, I think,
Yeah.
you know.
I agree. I think that what you choose to spend your time on and pay attention to is part of your self-defense, right? So watching the media, being, you know, on the roller coaster of politics is really an assault to your system, right? So protecting yourself by saying no in multiple ways, you know, including to spending all day stressing yourself out, you know, with adrenaline and cortisol watching the news. But yeah, so that's sort of one aspect of self-defense. But we've got some physical stuff that you're doing, Chris. So tell us
Yeah, and
about
there's
what you're doing.
definitely balance, you know, and I don't want to try to come off and be like I'm some kind of martial arts expert. I'm not. I'm really not. I've been studying training, how to defend myself for the last couple of years, and I'm pretty specific about calling it self-defense. And so, you know, starting with the philosophy aspect, like you're talking spiritually, it's so important when we look at the occulted mystery schools and like the Freemasons tracing board, for instance, you have the two pillars, right? And when we look at that, like metaphorically, what we're talking about is one, the pillar of non-aggression. And that's a lot of what the feminine aspect, the caring for our communities, actually caring for the next generation, not initiating harm, right? But the other pillar is half the picture, and that is self-defense. And that means we don't take it. You know, we don't let people abuse us. We don't let people step on us. We don't let people own us, right? And that's the problem. One of the major problems in our whole society is that, like under the modern laws, you're not actually allowed to protect yourself properly in many situations by law. You know what I mean? Like you're supposed to call somebody else to come help you, you know, but the truth is, for instance, where I live, I heard about a shooting that happened And the guy I knew who was on the scene when the shooting happened said it took 2 hours before the police and ambulance showed up. So, do you want to wait 2 hours to figure out if you're going to survive or not? And I think in its most basic form, when I'm talking about self-defense, what I'm talking about is survival. How important is your survival? What is the value of your life? Right? And I think a lot of people underestimate those questions. And my self-defense teacher is the type of person that, he'll go out and meet some women at a random dinner and start talking to them about self-defense and how important it is. And by the end, they're like, all like, man, I should be training more. Most women don't know that like 1 in 4 women get raped. You know what I mean? And that's probably not even the full big picture. It's really close to 25% of women that don't make it through college without somehow getting some male forcing themselves upon them. The percentages of women getting attacked is like way higher than men. I think the average statistics is like 1 in 7 men, but it's like 1 in 4 women. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of good reasons, especially for women, to have a plan, to have some sort of training you do that prepares you for situations. And that is you valuing your life and your choices. If you don't value your life and your choices, then go ahead, just walk out into the world and have no plan to defend yourself. But if you do value your freedom and your choices, then you should have a plan. And that's not just understanding more complex martial arts. That's not always even going to do it. And if we get deeper into this topic, I want to offer some real practical things you can practice and do and carry with you on a day-to-day basis to start working on this, even if you don't have like a school to go to or someone to train you the way I'm getting this really special training from someone who's an expert. There's a lot of ways to get started without that. And there's a lot you can do to prepare yourself. So that's just kind of my introductory. Anybody want to comment on those?
Yeah,
Go ahead,
I
Becky.
definitely do. You had mentioned that one, and this is a point of self-defense that doesn't involve, and of course, there's going to be situations that just happen, but self-defense that doesn't involve physical violence, and that's be aware of certain signs. 1 in 4 women who get raped and who get attacked missed the red flags, or they thought it was a carnival and they put themselves in that situation. They chose to go to a bar. They chose to let somebody roofie them. And what I mean by that is allow someone else to fix you a drink. One of the best ways that you can protect yourself is to not put yourself in situations that are dangerous and harmful. And you can't always predict what those situations are, but I promise you, you're probably not going to meet a ton of great people at bars. Like you might meet some good ones. I'm not saying you won't, but people who often frequent bars, they're not the safest people. They might not make the best choices. So like a great tip for self-defense is to recognize situations that are harmful. And when hopefully you have some awareness of that or different ideas of situations that are unsafe, and hopefully someone can prevent something bad from happening from the get-go, not traveling alone, or if you are traveling alone and you're crossing states and driving or something, conceal and carry. But I think a lot of the times women, they miss the signs and they put themselves in danger. And of course, there are exceptions. There's, I'm not saying every single case, but it's just something to be aware of. And yeah.
I
Thoughts on that.
agree. I think that,
I agree.
really women often do put themselves in unsafe situations, whether it's like getting too drunk, speaking of bars, being intoxicated, or going home with someone they just met, or all the online dating, meeting someone in a private location, or, there's lots of ways that I think that sometimes trusting too much is a mistake, and taking for granted that you can trust someone because they seem like a nice person, right? So there's an aspect of what someone called strategic awareness, right? That where you're actually really aware of your surroundings, of where you're standing, where you're looking, where your attention is, and the subtleties of the people around you, and really being careful not to, linger in places where you might get backed into a corner or whatever.
Yeah. I agree with all of everything that everybody said, but especially I did want to point out, like, the statistically wise, like when I was researching this, like the higher, if you were to look at it globally, yeah, women are more of a victim with this kind of thing on a global scale. I mean, it's not even, it's not even as remotely large as people think in America, but it does happen in America, of course it does. But on a global scale, it is certain women are certainly like the greater target because we're smaller, we're physically, we're not as dense as men are generally. So we're an easy target in that kind of respect. But I would agree that women will tend, especially the inauthentic woman who's being conditioned with things like, stuff like, woke agendas that come out, like the Me Too movement, princess programming. These kind of conditionings certainly create this mindset with women that, oh, we're empowered and we're this and we're that and we can do everything a man can do. So I'm going to like walk down this dark alley without any kind of like weapon or any way to defend myself. And that's fine. This will be fine. And it's just, women, me and my husband, like we've tried to do this for years. And, this is where you use discernment, you use forethought, and you go, okay, if I put myself in a position like this, if I am willing to do that, that's fine. That's a person's choice. We're all allowed to make choices, whether they're good or bad for us. And some of them are learning curve choices. Sometimes it's just like that. But you get to a point where you start to like relive some of the poor choices, and you're like, I kind of remember this last time, and maybe I should go this way instead of that way, and make a slightly better choice. Like maybe I won't do this hallucinogen with this like dude who just like walked into my house party. Stuff like that. It's a good point Brittany brought up, that women will go to bars and be like, oh, I don't have to pay for my drinks, and she's got some strange dude who's like, here's like 3 shots of tequila. And this happens all the time, and I hear it from women all the time personally. I mean, where people are justifying this is what I hear anyway. I hear it from women who want the empowerment to be, self-sufficient, be able to defend themselves. They're all about it. But at the same time, they justify not actually having a way to have self-defense or know any self-defense. They don't work out. They don't do things like martial arts training on any level. They don't even go to basic, because you can go to a basic self-defense class for women. There's just where it's basic stuff. It's like not even martial arts stuff. It's basic self-defense, they don't carry around pepper spray. They don't have a knife, even a pocket knife on them. And they reject the concept of owning a gun because of the conditioning up there they're getting from stuff like, the media that we were talking about earlier, where, got to use some of that discernment, to figure out what you should listen to and what you shouldn't listen to. So this is a dynamic with women that I'm seeing, where women are like rejecting the concept of actually using a tool or some sort of medium in order to defend themselves, or even think critically before making a decision. And then they go, oh, well, rape just happens to women all the time and we can't help it. We can't do anything about it. Well,
They just blame men and play a victim.
That's
I
it.
mean,
They want to have
rape
it
is
both
bad.
ways.
And the truth is, even knowing or even having a knife, for example, doesn't help you that much unless you know how to use it and how to protect yourself, strategically with it, when to pull it out, how to. So that's the practice.
That's a really important thing that you're saying there, Leslie. And that's what I'm going to probably harp on the most in this episode is the training aspect and practicing things. But like if I was teaching a class and you were my students right now, I'd be clapping and giving you a medal for what you said there, Brittany and Sarah. That was the first thing I wanted to talk about. Like, what is self-defense? A lot of times, what does it look like? Running, hiding, avoiding, distracting, confusing, using humor, lying, living. Real self-defense is not the shit in the movies. Real self-defense is seeing something happening before it happens and putting yourself in a smart, intelligent place. That could be anything from, there's situations in concerts and crowds where people get smashed because the whole crowd pushes them. That's situational awareness, like Leslie mentions. When I go into a restaurant or bar, like you said, Brittany, I try to find a seat or a place to stand with my back against the wall. I am aware if there's something where someone could be sneaking behind me. I'm not paranoid. I don't worry that someone's going to, but I do consider it. Everywhere I go, I look at the people. I try to just kind of get a feeling for who's there. And I pay attention to I don't know, I've heard people tell literal stories of, I don't know what was wrong. I was going down this trail. I felt a little weird. I decided to go back, found out later that there was a serial killer on that trail. Many times I've heard people tell these stories. So, paying attention to your instinct. Don't go out by yourself on a walk at night. There's people out there that are bigger than you that are carrying weapons and guns. Do you have a knife and a gun on you? And do you want to use them? It's not about fighting. Self-defense has nothing to do with fighting. I don't want to fight somebody. And if a situation does happen, I don't plan on fighting them. I plan on destroying them, if I need to. And so
that's just
go ahead.
Real quick. I just wanted to point out, you saying that is like self-defense has like, sometimes that requires like telling a lie. If Nazis come barging into your door, are you going to like tell them, oh, the people that you're hiding are like under the floorboard? You lie. Because that's self-defense.
Situations where it's necessary.
Your life's in danger. Right. You say whatever you got to say.
Whether you're doing it for you or you're doing it for somebody else for whatever reason. And nothing stops us, even if we're untrained, because I'm untrained. I'm not a trained person with fighting. But you don't want to back me in a corner because I will go rabid. I mean, pick up a rock or something. Do something. Kick them in the face. Do something. Do something tacky or something totally, hilarious and stupid, like you'd see in like a cartoon, like karate chop somebody in the throat. I mean, that's gonna make somebody back up for a few minutes, and you're gonna have a second to like deal with that. So yeah, but
well,
go on.
You kind of put the head on the nail, Sarah, when you mentioned pepper spray, because that's like one of the first practical things I wanted to bring up. These little things right here are for sale in every hardware store, at least out here in California. This has a little flip cap on it.
Yep.
And then I'm trying to get it to where you can see that's where the spray comes out. I have practiced with this, spraying it to see about how far it sprays. Leslie's got one because I give her a hard time. My kids, I tell them, don't go anywhere without your pepper spray. This is always in my right pocket. I have 2 knives, one in each pocket. This knife, it flips open. You can get these at Home Depot. Yep. Every time at the end of the day, I take it out of my pocket. I flip it open, flip it back closed, set it on the shelf. I go through a few little techniques of slipping it back and forth between my 2 hands. Why would you not carry pepper spray? It's vegetables. You can get in trouble for pepper spraying somebody if there wasn't a good reason for it, but why would you do that? So if you carry pepper spray with you every day, you just get used to carrying it. You're out in public, something feels a little weird. You start backing up against the wall, you put your hand in your pocket, you got it. You got your finger on the trigger. You know what I mean? If someone does approach you or make you feel uncomfortable, you don't want to show them that you have the pepper spray in the hand. You want to nonchalantly shoot it up their chest onto their face, starting low, working up the body, and back away, get the hell out of there. Don't wait to find out. You know, that gives you, like you're saying, that second you need it. That might be kicking someone in the balls. That might be throwing dirt in someone's face. I know a really good story. My martial artist told me of some guys that wanted to beat him up. He'd already had to be in a fight with this guy once that he didn't want to be in. He already won. And this guy was waiting for him at the end of the day to fight him again. He didn't want to fight this guy again. And so he went and bought a hot cup of coffee, and walked over with that hot cup of coffee. And as soon as the guy walked up to him and started stuff, he just threw the hot coffee in his face. It's like
the coffee just to throw it on the guy just in case.
Well, the guy, he knew what the guy was going to do. You know, he'd already had been into an issue with the guy. You know, the point is, you see something coming, don't wait for it to happen. Have a plan. Put something deadly in your hand. Pick up a handful of dirt. Salt and pepper is another one. You're in a restaurant, fill up your pocket with salt and pepper. Throw that in someone's face, and they're going to have a hard time coming at you. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of things day to day that you can start doing now, like carrying pepper spray. This here is bear spray. They go to an outdoor store, you can find bear spray. If you're going to go camping, why not have a bear spray handy? You know what I mean? Yeah, pot and pan, make some noise. Your voice is one of your best tools initially, but there's no reason not to have these things because they're not that expensive. And like I said, the pepper spray, you can keep it in your pocket everywhere you go, and that's training. Every day you put it in your pocket, it reminds you, I'm preparing. You know, if you're going to go walk in a busy city, why wouldn't you have a knife in your pocket and a pepper spray? I mean, better off a gun, but, you know, work your way up to something that you feel proficient with. And a knife, you can practice, get it out, feel what it feels like to swing it around, you know, switch it around in your hand different ways. Eventually, you'll probably cut yourself a little bit with it. That's part of owning a knife. But not a bad thing to learn. And once you do it, then you don't make that mistake anymore. You want to get familiar with, you know, just how it feels in your hand, taking it in and out of your pocket. And the same thing with the pepper spray. So a couple real simple things that anyone can do. And one other I'll add to that is a money clip. You can keep a money clip with like a $20 bill or 10 ones in it. And if someone, you know, a lot of times it's just like some weird homeless bum guy who's getting a little too close, who's making you feel weird, throw that money clip on the ground and keep moving, or throw it in their face. You know what I mean? Cost you $10 or $20, but you lived. It's worth it. You know?
Yeah. You got the fix he was trying to get out of you. I mean, yeah, these situations, like things can be, I mean, this is where discernment comes. This is where awareness comes, paying attention, using forethought. You know, when I was younger, I have kind of a somewhat a similar story. I was working in a Chinese restaurant, if you could call it Chinese, down in downtown LA. And where I worked, we had like a back door in the kitchen as a glass door. And there's a lot of homeless in downtown LA. A lot of them are career homeless. They've been on the streets for many, many decades of their lives. You know, we're actually seeing the last dregs of the career homeless, of people who were actually in mental institutions, you know, back in the day when they still had asylums. And what happened there was they because of the human rights violations that was eventually brought down by a woman, funny enough, because she went like all undercover. This was part of her going in to like correct the wrongs, you know, doing what's right despite the danger of what could happen, because these asylums were terrible. They chained people to walls. They basically put the undesirables and threw them away into institutions and poor farms like that. So when that happened and they shut down all these asylums, they just sent everybody outside, you know, so there was nowhere for people to go. And that's why people don't understand why we have, I mean, that's not the only reason why we have such a homeless epidemic in this country. It's not anymore, you know, there's more reasons now, but that's what kind of really started the biggest surge of that homelessness in America. Is a lot of these were career homeless people. They were already like traumatized and abused and medicated through the asylum, and then they were like thrown out in the streets and became homeless because there's nowhere else for them to go. So we're starting to see, probably in the last like 20, 30 years of that, the last dregs of the people who were coming out of that. But when I was younger, I worked in a place, it was a glass store, and I used to give one of the homeless guys who hung out in the back corner there a meal when I was on shift. You know, just the guy's crazy. Like, he was definitely like gone. He wasn't living in our reality anymore. And so I'd give him a meal, and he got a little bit too comfortable. And one day he kind of opens the door and he grabs my arm and starts to try to pull me out. Now, one of the great things about self-defense is that there are other people who will be in your environment, even if you're like somebody who's not very keen or very capable or very able to defend yourself in certain ways. There's usually going to be somebody around you in a situation, even strangers, who are going to step in and defend you when you are incapable of doing so. And that was the situation here, where a couple of the line cooks come over and they took care of it. And eventually, the next day, they actually had to lie to him and tell him that I had died. Just because this is the only way an unfortunate individual like that would be able to back away and find another thing to occupy his time. So, I mean, that being said, like, I mean, you know, of course, not having such a trust element in people or strangers or whatever, where you're just allowing them to do whatever they want around you, like buy you drinks all night, or, you know, going home with a guy or whatever it is, or a girl, you know, because girls do crazy shit too. Sometimes they get a little wild. You know, there is that element. You don't want to lose faith in the people who are in your immediate environment. And, you know, people who, you know, I think most people are generally decent, even if they don't have all of their psychological or moral or spiritual ducks in a row. They don't necessarily want to see other people get hurt. So there are situations where a stranger will step in and help to defend somebody who is clearly incapable of doing that for themselves. So that's something I wanted to add in as well.
That's a great story, Sarah. You're reminding me also of a story my self-defense teacher told me. A friend of his found himself in a very difficult situation. He's walking down the street and he's not in his country. He's in a different country. And he finds himself kind of being half surrounded by sort of a gang that was on the side of the street. And, you know, it's a little tense for a second. And he sees a group of people on the other side of the street, look like coming out of a restaurant, some kind of big family or something. And he just raises his hand and waves at him. Hey, guys, I'll be right over there. He didn't know these people, but the people that were kind of cornering him, now they think he's attached to this whole crowd of people across the street. They don't know that he doesn't know those people, and that gets him out of the situation. So that's kind of what I'm pointing out. You don't need to be honest when you're trying to survive or you're concerned about your safety. It's okay to tell a little white lie or trick somebody to get yourself to safety. And I'm all about honesty. Don't lie, you know, but when it comes to protecting yourself and keeping yourself safe, especially in a situation where some kind of radar is telling you you're in danger, do or say what you need to say, even if that means tricking the people that I know those people. Look, I'm waving to them. You know what I mean? How you position your body with confidence says a lot. You're not afraid because you got all these friends over here, you know, and that's also a good reason to have good rapport with people and to talk to people that you work with or that are around your building, so you kind of get a feeling for what they're all about. I had one time when this seemingly crazy guy started living across the street from my house, and he was up all night like screaming obscenities, and my kids were scared. You know what I mean? And I didn't really just want to call the police on this guy. So I walked over there and met this guy and got to know him and shook his hand and got a feel for how strong his hand was and looked in his eyes and got a feeling for maybe what drugs he might be on, you know? And I got for myself a feeling for how dangerous this guy was. Now, you may not do that if you don't have that level of confidence in yourself, but figuring out where people are at, getting to know them, getting rapport with people who are around you could be crucial, you know, like you're saying in your story.
Yeah.
You know, Sarah had given the example about, you know, if somebody were to confront her, she would go rabid, right? And what that reminded me of is the willingness to go all the way, like if you have to, right? You know, that really, if you're going to defend yourself, you need to commit to it. And there's some principles there that I think are helpful. Chris, maybe it's a good time to talk about.
Yeah. The three most important principles when it comes to self-defense are distance, timing, and commitment. And those are the three things I've also found in my own mind since it's been drilled into me over and over from my teacher: distance, timing, commitment. It also applies to a lot of other aspects of life, I've found. But he told me a story about a woman that he'd been in his self-defense class who had studied self-defense and had been attacked before. And a man attacked her. And this is a terrible story. I kind of hate to tell it, but it's an important lesson to learn. And she actually got a hold of his fingers, his face. And she had her fingers on the guy's eyes, but she didn't have the wherewithal to smash her fingers in. And instead, he broke her fingers and went ahead and raped her. You know, so like, just because you know that you can get your hands on a guy's eyes, you also have to have that commitment to push him, you know, smash his eyes, smash his whatever you got to do. Otherwise, you're going to get your fingers broken and you're going to get whatever it's going to happen to you. He's going to decide to do to you. And there's another famous story of a woman named Meredith who was a martial arts expert. And this guy caught her in the woods. It came at her with two different big weapons. She managed to disarm him twice, fought with this guy for like almost 20 minutes, and he finally got the better of her. And, you know, like, why didn't she win that fight? She got the weapons out of his hand. She obviously had the weapon in her hand at some point, and she didn't hit him with the weapon because her training was to throw the weapon aside, like they trained in the dojo in martial arts class. And there's stories about police officers that they get so used to picking up their shells after shooting their gun that they'll be in a real life situation and there's guns being fired and they're picking up the shells, you know. So what we practice and what we run through our mind has to be real and realistic, and we have to be willing to do what needs to be done when the time comes. And if you keep those three things in mind, distance, timing, and commitment, those are the three most important fundamental principles when it comes to self-defense.
Great.
Yeah.
I like that you guys brought that up. Those are beautiful, beautiful points. Brian tells me that too. And as a former Marine, they were taught to kill in 3 hits. But Brian's made the point, like a predator, you know, whether it's a person or an animal, it's not going to stop. You know, if it's on a mission to get you, it will get you. And it will not stop until you make it stop. And just beautiful points highlighted.
Yeah, great thing to bring up, that you better be ready to commit and if you're not doing it for yourself, find a reason why you would do it. I mean, I know that I myself, and this is for like all men and women and people out there who are in this position, because I personally hear this excuse all the time, especially in the chronic world, where they're like, well, I'm physically incapable. And I'm like, yeah, well, maybe you can't pick up, you know, a sniper or like a big old huge heavy gun that like, you know, most people could probably train with, you know, man or woman, and be able to use that well. but what stops you? There are a million ways out there, creative ways for us to defend ourselves in so many different ways. And even if you aren't successful with it, committing is still a big, valuable thing to understand, that even if we are not successful, at least you tried, and at least you worked at it. I mean, like, say we were to break out in some sort of civil war in this country, or, in our time, most people would be physically capable of, maybe participating in that. If it came down to it, if you have to like defend your home, that's what happened in our Civil War. It wasn't just the people who were participating in it and fighting in the Civil War. There was so much, outside destruction. A troop comes through a town and it just fucking obliterates the town's resources, tears up people's houses, and does whatever these things happen in war. So even when you're not somebody who's participating in the war as a soldier, you still have to know how to defend yourself in certain ways, because it just, that means like finding the weapon that works for you, whether it's, in the modern day, the weapon of the day, mace, a small gun, whatever. Most women can handle a 38. Most people who are physically disabled can handle a 38. And you can train children. I mean, they were training children back in the day as young as 6, 7, 8 years old. They
still are in China.
Yeah, they put a gun in their son's hand, and like, you got to learn how to use a rifle. This is part of life, part of self-defense principles. So I think it's important, like, even people who are physically, like, I would not be able to like march in a war. But if somebody comes into my house, and that's, I know where my limits are and what I can't do. And like, of course, my husband would step in and do what needs to be done, because that's his, part of his role. He knows that's part of his role. It's his family. He's capable, and he knows that's where he stands in our family as far as that kind of thing goes. But if it came down to it, I know how, I mean, even if I couldn't like get a gun fast enough or get a knife fast enough and, use it the right way, nothing stops me from grabbing a butcher knife out of the kitchen, or running or kicking or doing something. Maybe there's a glass vase up here at the table, while I'm struggling, and I, get creative, and people think it's so black and white that it has to be a gun or some kind of big old weapon or whatever. But, fine. I think my point I was originally trying to say was, you got to have a reason. If it's not for yourself or your own survival, like, I would do absolutely everything that I could, even if it was to my own detriment, even if I didn't make it. I have a husband, I have a child, I have a family, that you ain't touching them if you're going through me. You've got to make that commitment. You've got to make that stance and know where you're going to stand in front of that, like draw that line, what you're going to deal with, what you're going to put up with, and what you won't put up with.
Yeah.
So
know your line. I think that, that's something to think about. Most people probably don't think about that. And because we put it out of our heads, probably most of the time we don't want it to happen, so we don't think about it. But I think if you do spend some time thinking about it, then you're more prepared, and also having the awareness of your surroundings, so that you know where the vase is, that if you have a stapler in your drawer or a glass jar or a stick or something.
I'd like to offer one more tip on that. Like I'm pointing out the importance of training. There's another aspect of training is that you're describing, and that's the psychological, preparing yourself for different situations. How would I handle different situations? Well, we have a tool that most of humankind never had, and that is called YouTube. And you can type in fights in YouTube, and something we do at almost every self-defense class, usually towards the end, is we spend a little time discussing something in the news. And sometimes he'll give us a specific assignment. Hey, there was a stabbing on the subway in New York. I want everybody to watch that video, and we're going to have a thorough discussion about it next time. And since we've been doing that, I've started getting a lot of them on my feed. They show up, and I've discovered these guys called Budo Brothers, and I'd recommend it's a good one because I've showed it to my self-defense teacher, and he likes how they talk. They'll show you something that happened in real life, and then they'll go over it piece by piece and break it apart and be like, you know, what that guy did there was pretty amazing, but was it a good idea? You know, well, what should you do in a similar scenario? So, I mean, this is something you could do sitting on the toilet, you know, watch a couple videos, think through it. What if it was me in that scenario and someone was running at me in this grocery store? You know, because we have all these recordings and people discussing these recordings. So it's a treasure trove that you can use to work through these things mentally and be somewhat more prepared.
Yeah. Practice.
I'm gonna go sit on the
Psychological
toilet real
training.
quick.
Yeah. Practice. Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I would even say that is something, you know, that's like a shadow work type of practice where you're preparing your mind and your heart for something that may or may never happen, but you've got to, it's preparing yourself psychologically and emotionally for a what if situation. So that's a good practice to be in. And I would call that part of the, what some people call the shadow work process of like really thinking about these kinds of situations of what you would and wouldn't do, you know, like, well, okay, you know, probably wouldn't happen, but if this did happen, I mean, I think that's a great piece of advice, Chris. Thank you.
And why, you know, and a lot of these situations, there's other options you wouldn't have thought of.
Yeah.
Brittany actually mentioned sticks, and
Yeah.
I wanted to show this. This is a Filipino fighting stick. You can look them up. They're called Eskrima sticks. They're about 2 feet long. And I also have a bow staff that's made of the same rattan. Yes, you're awesome, Brittany.
My kids lost the other one, but yes.
Yeah, they actually, if you try to look on Amazon, they're really hard to find. They only sell foam ones. But if you go on eBay and you type in Eskrima sticks or Kali sticks, you'll find them there, and you can order them in sets, and they come with little bags. Here's one I've used a lot that has, you know, tape. You put tape when it starts breaking apart, and that kind of helps for aiming too. And what will happen is when you start swinging sticks is sticks move at about 400 miles an hour or up to pretty fast. When you swing a stick, you can hear go, whoop, right? Now try moving your fist as fast as you can. You're never going to get that speed. A fist is only going to move maybe 30, 40 miles an hour. You know what I mean? So if you start practicing with sticks swinging around your head, your brain starts getting used to that 200-300 mile an hour speed, and the speed of a fist doesn't seem nearly so fast. So I highly recommend playing with sticks, and you don't need to know specific form to play with sticks or a bow staff. You just kind of practice, start swinging them. And then from there, I could provide quite a few links. I would recommend people check out Modern Arnis, like I said, ARNIS, and learn what's called Sinwalis, basic Sinwalis. You can practice. Leslie and I have a little video of us practicing. And I did put together a little 3-minute video, if you guys want to watch it, of me kind of going through some of the things I will practice when I'm going through my practice routine, just so I could show you. Things you can practice even on your own. Some of the most powerful things are practicing with a partner, but that's a lot harder to bring about, you know, to find someone else who's willing to do this with you. And I highly recommend that. If you can, you need to figure out how to get your hands on someone, how it feels for someone else to get their hands on you. And, but outside of that, just some basic moves every day. The simple one I started teaching, was kick a tree. Find a big sturdy tree in your backyard or in the park next to your house and just stand in front of it and do a straight kick. And just practice that over and over, you know, do 10 of them. If you can keep your balance and kick that tree really hard and not fall backwards or fall forward, that's huge. And you're not going to get that balance until you feel how that feels to put your foot solidly onto that tree, a few times, and how does your body react? So if you guys want, I'll play that little
Hey,
video.
Chris,
And
before you do that, could you speak a little bit to the issues of timing and distance? Like, for example, if you have a knife, when do you pull it out of your pocket? What are the issues to consider around timing, and what's important around distance when you're like standing next to people or positioning yourself?
okay, well, that's huge. Of course, it depends on our body type. Um, and one of the part of the reason I'm bringing up the stick is one of the most powerful things of having a tool like a stick is that you can push somebody away from you. And one thing they taught in Wing Chun too is, the straight line down the center of our body. If you ever have to poke or push, if you do a direct movement straight from me, straight to you, that's the shortest route, the shortest distance between A and B, right? People tend to want to do these like punches, big wind up first before you swing something. If you're direct and you're holding a stick and you just poke somebody, they don't have a chance to swing at you. If someone has a stick in their hand and they try to raise it and you grab their arm before they raise it, they can't swing it at you. You know what I mean? So, there's different types of distance, and we talk about that in class, being right up against somebody where you're like in grappling mode, the distance where you're like, elbows and arms. Then there's the next distance where you're like a fist away. And then the next distance where you're like a foot, like kicking distance. And then you're at ranged weapon distance, and so starting to understand the difference between those distances and the length of your own arms and your own legs, that's part of why that tree exercise is really crucial. You get a real feel where you can stand solidly and still kick something without losing your balance and bring your foot back to standing. So, I think that really getting down to understanding distance, you have to start training with another human being to really get a feel for it. But in the meantime, what you can do is start noticing those different distances, like what could I do here, what could I not do from here, and if someone's getting in your personal space, like the distance of your arm, that's too close, and that means you should either be backing up, stepping away, or using, like I'm saying, some sort of tool to physically let them know that's too close. And Brittany did a really good job of showing something that is really a good thing, and I like to do it like this with my hands together, because the truth is someone can grab your fingers, and that is kind of dangerous. But either way, if there's something going down and your hands are already out here and you're saying, hey, wait, listen, let's talk, your hands are already here. And so if they swing at you, you can do this. You know what I mean? You can cover up, or you can swat a hand away and move, right? But if your hands are at your waist or behind your back or in your pockets, it's going to take that much longer. And when it comes down to something like this, we're talking about nanoseconds. So, if someone's too close to you and maybe you're up against a wall, you want to have your hands up, and you don't want to make it obvious you're going to fight. You don't want to put them like this, because that says, hey, I want to fight you. That's not what you want. You want to say, hey, I don't want to fight you. I'd rather we work this out. Let's discuss this. But your hands are right here. Boom. Right where you need them to be. If you need to get them in front of you, the directest, straightest route is the shortest route. So then timing, you guys ever play that game where you put your hands out and someone else put their hands on top of you and you try to do like that before they move away? That is like one of the best possible things you could do to practice timing and commitment, because what it teaches you, the more times you do it, is the person that's slapping, if they can distract you even the littlest bit, they can slap you every time. And that's true. If someone wanted to stab you, there's nothing you could do. They could walk up behind you and stab you, and it'd be too late. You know what I mean? You can't 100% predict everything before it comes. So, but what you can do is know the timing and practice that timing. And that's partly why I bring up using something like sticks and swinging them around. Your brain and your body starts to get used to a faster timing than the movement of a hand. So
Practicing
those are all
discernment.
crucial things.
Yeah. I think that's helpful.
I would also like to add, because Leslie did mention a knife, like when to pull one out, or a gun or a weapon, and I would definitely suggest if and only if you know that they are trying to end yours. Like once you know the intent is to seriously physically harm you, like to kill you, that is when you pull out the knife if you have one, or a gun, and be willing to commit to using it. Like as soon as there's an intent for severe harm and they are within your personal space, like I think people should be ready to defend it full force.
Yeah.
You
I
know,
think part
and
of the
avoid
key
it at
that
all costs. But once you like, if you know someone's coming and they have a knife and they're trying to kill you, if you can't get away, I would just straight up go for offense, not
Commitment.
defense. And that's
Yeah.
just that's
that
also
that
like tempo.
that is awesome, Brittany, and that is the distance thing too. Is
Avoid it at
know,
all costs. But if it's
right? Like
serious, yeah.
when someone makes a certain intention, there's ways you can start to tell, and that's partly why I'm saying it's so
Exactly.
important to have pepper spray, because like that's stage one. You know, if you've put your hands out and someone walked through your hands, you know it's game on. You know what I mean? If you already used your voice and said, "Stop there, you're too close, you're getting in my space," and your hand is out, and they've bridged that distance, you already know time to flip the switch. They crossed the line. But you have to know that line and you have to set that boundary in your own self. And it might be different depending on when maybe you're at a camping site. Someone starts walking into your campsite. Do you let them walk all the way into your campsite? Or do you meet them as they're coming and stop right there and say, "Hey, I'm sorry. I don't understand why you're coming so close. I don't know you." You don't have to be rude about it, but you confront us. The sooner you figure out the situation's happening, that's timing, the sooner you can react to it. And the longer you wait and the closer someone gets, you might not be able to do anything when it comes down to it. So it's very much about being proactive and using the tools we have to find out what someone's intent is before it's too late. And once you know, like you're saying, he crossed the line. I told him to stop. I backed up. I put my hand out and he walked through my hand. No, that's it. I'm stabbing him.
Yeah.
Now, I personally think when it comes to weapons, if someone doesn't know you have a weapon, the longer they don't know you have a weapon,
That's better.
the better chance you have of using that weapon effectively. So I wouldn't take out a knife and say, "I have a knife." Or, you know, we actually have a method to where you stand at the side like a fence and you push somebody back. And if they push you, you turn the other way and the knife is already out and they walk into it.
I
You know
also
what I
want
mean?
to be clear in that situation, like someone's violating a camping site and I have a weapon and I've given them warnings. I'm not just gonna be like, "Okay, well, time to stab you." But
Right.
if someone has clearly they're entering your space, they're not taking your warnings. They pull out, they're going for a knife. They are within your striking range. If you know that their intention is to kill you, to severely harm you, well, that's what the knives and guns are for.
Yeah. It's
Absolutely.
And there's a
knowing,
time and a place for that.
yes, exactly.
But maybe don't
Brittany.
go just jump to stab someone. Like there are other methods, like you've said several times,
Start
Chris,
with the pepper
like if
spray,
you have
you
a
know, the
stick,
bear spray,
you know,
the stick.
avoid the death thing as much as you possibly can, because honestly, the legal system is not always, it really depends on where you live. Many legal systems are not supportive of that, and you will fight tooth and nail to have your rights honored. My grandfather, he was in the Navy. He has a lot of guns. He always says, "Do not pull out your gun unless you're in a situation that calls for it and you're willing to pull the trigger." It's not a threat. It's you don't go saying, "Oh, I have a gun, you better listen to me." No. When you pull out that gun, it's because it's the time and place for it, and you've got to be willing to follow through. Yeah, there's definitely a time and a place, and knowing when to take it up a notch. But I do not recommend everyone just, if you warn someone and they don't listen, you go in for the kill. Like, please don't do that. That's not
That's
not in your best interest.
That's a good point to bring up. And I wanted to mention that, like, when it comes to that point in that situation, and you know you've given your warnings, you've established your boundary, you're wondering what the stranger's doing, and they're disregarding your communication there, where you've established your boundaries, you've said no, like, "Can I help you? What are you doing?" In any situation, not just at a campsite, it could be at the grocery store, it could be outside your house, whatever it is. yeah, you should never just like jump in for the kill. Like that's one thing that a lot of Europeans always just automatically think. They just think all Americans are freaking gun crazy and we're just gonna like we're gonna, you know, just take everybody down who like,
Cowboy execution.
triggers us. But that's like not reality. That's like fiction. That's fantasy, living in fantasy, and so you gotta know that discernment, and you don't have to be psychic, people out there. You don't have to be psychic to get a feel of another person stance, of how we conduct ourselves, how we form our sentences when we're speaking to others, how we are standing in others. Like, are we casual? Are we like, coming in at, you can get a feeling of what other people are going to do or say. And that's using discernment. That's practicing discernment. That's practicing your awareness. And not just assuming this, that, or the other shit, because what if a dragon comes in, and that's what's her face on, Newsmax said, or whatever the hell. It's using your own personal discernment and knowing when you're going to take it up a notch and be like, oh, okay, I can see how this is gonna go. And it's about being creative if you have to. Like, I mean, I once had a conversation with somebody about like, okay, if somebody's in your house, someone breaks into your house and they've got a gun to your kid's head, and what are you going to do about this? They're like, oh, I'm going to call the cops. I'm like, how are you going to call the cops? You're sitting there with a intruder and they got a gun at your kid's head. What are you going to do? Call the cops? Let the situation play out and then call the cops after? Or maybe you can get away and you call the cops during, and they get there, what, 20 minutes after the intruder puts a bullet in your kid's head? Got to think about these things. Got to learn how to be creative. You got to use discernment, and you got to go, okay, for me, where is that boundary that I am going to give allowance for in regards to my safety, the safety of my family and the people I care about, the safety of my neighbor's child who I don't know them very well, but you know, that's where you step in, right? So it's a good point to bring up, guys.
I
But
think another point, Brittany made that was really good is that while we have the right to self-defense, up to the point of our protection, right, to protect ourselves, there is the relativity of the man-made legal system. And so having that in your context of your thinking and how you strategize and make your plan. And so like when Chris was saying, or one of you was saying, yeah, first maybe you use your voice, and then, you try to get away, and then you have your pepper spray. But if, then you pull out your knife or your gun, right? I don't know, any comments on that, Chris?
I'd like to get in deeper, but I know we're getting in, it's been kind of a long, I know it's getting later with the time, but there are actually 6 fundamental principles. And I brought up the first 3, which is distance, timing, and commitment. And those mostly have to do with handling yourself in a situation, right? But the next 3 are a little bit more with what Brittany's talking about, understanding the law and the world we're in. And those 3 are ability, intent, and proximity. And these are the 3 things that will define the outcome of a court case. We got to realize there's cameras everywhere now. Everywhere you're going, someone's going to have a phone, someone's going to have a camera. So if some sort of incident happens, you have to realize that in order for someone to be incriminated, the jury and the judges and all, they're going to try to prove that this person had the ability to do the thing. They had intent. They showed intent to do the thing. And then they were in the proximity to do the thing. So in other words, there's stories of people who have somehow got inside of someone's house where the person let them in. And yeah, they were doing something bad, but it's really unclear to the judge and jury whether that was really their intent, or whether that just happened once they got in there. Whereas if you close your front door and you don't open it, and someone starts breaking into your door and the hinges are knocked off, when they look at that in court, they're like, this person clearly showed intent. Look, they broke the hinges, right? So you keep these things in mind. That might help protect you in these type of cases. If you understand that these things have to be decided in court. And if you do have to take somebody out or get crazy on somebody or use your weapon tools, you make sure you're yelling to whoever else is around. Call the police, help, this person's crazy, they're trying to kill me. Because that's what you want recorded when the 911 call is. They want to hear you saying, help, I'm in danger, even if you're beating the crap out of this person. Yeah. You know what I mean? You want to be scared and you want to be vocal and let people know that this person's trying to kill me. That's why this is happening. Otherwise, there's a lot of situations where you look like the bad guy just because you know what you're doing. And I've heard of a specific case like that where a guy defended himself and his girlfriend and wound up killing one of the assailants. There were 3 people trying to attack him at once, and he got in trouble. And the cops took him to jail and let the other guys go. It took him $60,000 and 2 or 3 years to prove that he was in self-defense. You know what I mean? And so we got to keep in mind that stuff too.
Yeah, and
self-defense against the government and the laws, man's laws, you know?
Yeah.
It wouldn't be a bad idea either to at least have some resources for an attorney who does defend against such cases. Because my grandfather made the point to me too. He's like, he says a lot of attorneys will not defend somebody. So even just having somebody who would be willing to bat for you or give you counsel in such a situation, it wouldn't be a bad card to have up your sleeve.
Yeah. Using the system that we have, because
they're going to use it against us.
They're going to use it. So that's a good point to bring. Like they like to, for aesthetic reasons, they like to defend the one who looks the victim part. You know, it's a emotional response. It's part of that conditioning out there. But Chris, I wanted to watch the video that you have for us, and then we have a little bit more awesome reading where we'll go into a little bit more of the spiritual self-defense, basic, real easy stuff, and anybody can employ them immediately. So let's take it to Chris and watch your video.
Awesome. Right on. Yeah, this is a little 3-minute video. I just kind of went through some of the things I do in training regularly, just to kind of give a little visual. And here it is. I'll just describe it as we go, because it's just really not sound. Here it is. There. Is that working? Yep. I lost it. So this is a form. We don't do that. I went out of the screen a little bit there. We don't do a whole lot of forms, but it is a kind of a cool way to feel the flow between one move and another. This is what's called the 12 strikes. And you can look those up. They can be done with a knife. They can be done with empty hands, and they can be done with a stick. I got this playing like a little faster than normal speed. So if it looks like I'm doing it really fast, it's partly because it's sped up by it to 1.25. But this is called Simwalis. I'm doing what's called Redondo right here. And it's just a way of swinging the sticks. There's several ways you can learn. And then at some point here, I switched to what's called double Simwali. And this can be done with a partner too, where you're hitting the sticks against each other. And then there's all kinds of combinations that could be done. The more you do them, the more comfortable they start to feel. Then here I'm doing the 12 strikes with using my other hand, following up each strike. And that's to get used to, you know, if you strike someone, you want to grab a hold of them and twist them up onto the floor and put them into a submission. And that's part of why you learn to follow up one hand with the other. This is a bow staff. And here I just doing a little form. There's a bow staff form. again, it kind of just helps you learn how to flow between the moves. I showed this video to my self-defense teacher, and he said, "You're doing good, but you got to work on flowing a little bit more." I could see you kind of pausing between moves. And so you see I dropped it. Just kind of learning to swing the stick from hand to hand and how that feels. And then at the end of the video, I'm going to do some stuff with a knife that I'm kind of excited to show you guys, because a good friend of ours in the natural law community named Justice Wagman forged this knife and built it, made it by hand. And I'm doing a couple knife moves that I practice on a daily basis. And I'm really excited to show off that knife that Justice made for me. And then I was kind of like practicing taking out of the sheath, and this is called by the 9-point dexterity drill, which is, I do it with my knife every day when I take it in and out of my pocket to practice it. It's a little harder with that big old 10-inch knife, but it feels good. And that's pretty much going to be the end of the video. But I just basically wanted to show you, like, that big tree behind me is one that I like to stand and kick sometimes. That it only takes 10-15 minutes to do training. Every day, go out in your yard and practice kicking a few times and practice spinning a stick around. Watch a little YouTube video and you'll get better and better. And just feel that flow between your body and the movements. It feels good. And that's it.
Pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, awesome. That's a great example of what people can do. And like even you say the power of YouTube. I mean, like, my husband learned how to, he figured out how, like, you would lay down a floor just by watching enough YouTube videos. So I mean, YouTube can be a great resource, even though it's ran by shitheads. But
I mean, better if you can find real people to train with, but I'm saying anything to get started, here's a way,
Exactly. Even like reading on it. So, I mean, and he's a great artist too. I would say I follow him on Facebook, Justin Wagman.
Yeah, for sure. I wanted just to real quick comment, because this is reminding me of my bad habits of not carrying my pepper spray with me, or not being in the habit of carrying a knife. And a lot of it is because I don't have, like, women, the way a lot of times we dress isn't conducive to hiding a weapon, for me, or I rebel. Like, I don't want to, I have my fanny pack, but I don't have really a purse. It's like these little weird practical things that are stupid to make excuses. But I think we really need to think about what's, like Chris, you were saying, valuing ourselves, our lives, and more than our fashion or our laziness or avoidance, whatever that is, Yeah.
And then an attacker of any kind, an intruder, whoever it is who has the intention of stepping over that boundary that you've set, they don't care what you're wearing, ladies. So be a little bit more practical. You don't need to, like, throw your makeup on to go to freaking Walmart or whatever. Just, be a little bit more practical,
Even shoes, like the self-defense teacher, he's like not a fan of high heels, or like he's like, you dress.
Or sandals. I love flip-flops and sandals, but I've kind of stopped wearing them to an extent because he gave me a hard time about it. Like, you should be wearing some shoes with some pointy toes.
Yeah. So it's like, the practical uses are, even if you're a lady and you like wearing heels, make it a stiletto, because that shit'll hurt if you stick it in somebody's head.
Kick them right, but yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it like, throw your shoes off and bam, right in the head. They are not, that's going to give you that seconds advantage we spoke about earlier. So you can be creative, people.
I agreed. I just want to say, I don't think you have to, maybe I'm just a girl, but I don't think you have to be unfashionable, impractical, or unsafe. Because in this baby, Brian got me a sting ring. It's a tasering. You fire that on, and it's in there. It's in there, and then sitting right at the bottom of it is my knife, and it can go on my hip. And I pull this out if I have to work an evening shift, but I'm just saying it can be cute and practical and safe, all in one bag.
Just be
They even sell
creative.
pink guns.
That's it. I just watched
They
a
do.
16-year-old girl got a birthday gift on some video I was just watching, and her father bought her this like beautiful rifle, bright baby pink, but beautiful rifle. Like that is like one of those examples of father being like, okay, I can handle having a daughter, but she's not going to be taken advantage of, and she's going to learn how to be a human being. Excuse me, be a human being on this planet where unfortunately we're not all at the level of understanding, that everybody is born with inherent God-given rights. And some of them out there, which I do recommend going out there and getting to know some of them because it's valuable, but some of them out there are still running around like dumb animals. So you got to be practical with these things. So I just wanted to, we have a little bit more reading to do here. Oh, that's what I missed. This.
It's still loading on my side.
Yeah, it's still black.
I still got a black
That's your
screen.
screen sharing.
Okay,
You might have to stop it and restart it.
hold on. Okay. Does that work? No. Yes. Okay. Yeah, we were talking about
There it goes.
movies earlier. You brought up the Ip Man movie series. I had been thinking about this. The Ong Bak movies are great as well. Great series of movies with Tony Jaa. And I want to say I loved these movies. I mean, I like a lot of martial arts movies, but what's great about these movies too is that it shows how like he doesn't even really use weapons. It's all it's all is it offense? It's all like offense fighting, I think, where he's just like using his elbows and his knees and like taking out like the whole. So I highly recommend these movies. But to see, get back to the reading. So we did our history. So these were some of the modern self-defense techniques. Can we all see this?
Yeah.
Perfect. So modern self-defense techniques, these will be links and a couple of PDF links that you'll be able to find and download when you go into the description where we have it all. So we have, the first one I found was the 10 self-defense strategies. I think Chris, this was sent, you guys sent this to me. How to escape an attack. So it's like a kind of large poster, which you can available for download. Here's the link right here. The second one was the Carl Sestari's Complete Training Guide to Self-Defense. So again, another PDF download people will be able to utilize. 7 Principles of Self-Defense. Another link right here, which is the Gloucester, Ottawa 7 Principles of Self-Defense. So I thought they were pretty interesting. So go and check those out. You can download them. They're free for download. So let's go into the methods of spiritual self-defense. And we have mentioned a few things earlier about this as well. But I just want to lay down a grounding of how I feel people can start with understanding spiritual self-defense and spiritual self-defense and knowing how to understand where to start with that, because like I'm a big thing where there's all these things out in the world that says, okay, you do this, you do that. Well, you know, it's like this whole like, you know, instructions on how to do things. But sometimes it can be very difficult or confusing for people to understand, okay, where do I actually start? I can't just like, you know, sometimes the instructions don't include that jumping off point. And I feel like the jumping off point has to be an inner thing. It has to be part of the inner self. You've got to connect to your inner fraction of spirit, and you've got to create that relationship with yourself first, the inner you, the big you, the high self you, the fraction of spirit that you are. You know, stop going externally, start inwardly first, and then focus on all the outside stuff after. Because if you're not there with yourself and you don't know yourself properly, and you're not you don't have a good relationship with that inner self, it's going to be very difficult to even get to the point where you know how to create a physical boundary, where you know where you stand, of what your limitations are, of what you will and will not allow, if that makes sense. Like, you know, in the physical world, you know, you've got to start inward first, spiritually, I feel. In spiritual self-defense, I would start is first and foremost, you don't have to know anything even esoteric. You don't have to be religious. You don't have to have any of the things. I don't feel like there's so many things that are added in like as requirements that I just don't feel are totally necessary, when all you need is the ABCs. And for me, the ABCs are first the list of the 7 Hermetic principles, which, you know, if you know me, you know, I don't really care what people call this list of stuff. But in the freedom movement, a lot of people call it, they refer to it as natural law, but it's 7 Hermetic principles. It's really, I would just call them the mechanisms of reality and how this reality operates universally. And it's like this, and it's going to happen like this, just like, you know, plants create, you know, help create oxygen, and gravity makes you fall down, and, you know, human lungs can't breathe underwater. Like these are just things that are how reality works. And that's how I would put that. So you have the 7 Hermetic principles. You have mind, mentalism, and you have correspondence, you have vibration, you have polarity, you have rhythm, you have cause and effect. And it's important to understand that cause and effect, there's the plane of effects, there's the plane of causality. And one's taking place in the physical world, one's taking place in the mental world, and you need to understand how to coordinate them. And then there's gender, which, sorry, not sorry, it has nothing to do with your physical organs down there. That is an internal thing. So these are the 7 Hermetic principles. And we can go through all this in a minute, guys. And I have them defined up here. They'll be up in the Substack as usual, so people can go in and really, though, go and research 7 Hermetic principles on your own. I highly recommend it. And take in everything, absorb everything. Don't just say, oh, this one person said that, so that, blah, blah, blah. You know, take it all in. Go and look at everybody and all the books and all the videos that might be talking about it, and use those, practice those discernment skills, and learn how these things are, because we can't really define these things for you. We can, but you have to understand what they are on a level that is more automatic, like breathing, like knowing when to stop before you walk off a cliff. These are mechanisms of reality, and they should be taught from day one to all of our children. So the the next part, the practice of what I would call these principles, the practice of understanding that these mechanisms in reality exist as a thing that's just happening. Practicing them is not necessarily having some item in your hand and knowing, oh yeah, this mouse works. I can see, it's provable. It's provable through what I've been calling experience-based proof, going through your life and understanding that this is how reality operates because I have experience and I've lived longer than one day. So I understand how shit works because I'm not, I'm not like sitting in a room doing nothing all day. I've lived longer than 24 hours, so I kind of got a grasp on things. So to practice these principles of reality, there is a requirement that I feel anyway is necessary if you are going to live in accordance with spirit or high self or source or Yogi Bear or God or whatever people want to call it. I don't want to have any arguments. I do get weird messages, so it's bizarre. I know, whatever people want to call it. I usually call it spirit or source or God or whatever is what I feel the most comfortable with. Not employing these requirements, which means utilizing them, will lead to negative outcomes. So that's just how it works. If you don't operate in accordance with reality, if you don't use a tool correctly, it's not going to work correctly. It's just the consequence of that. So if the requirements are employed, then a positive outcome will occur. You use a wrench for the right reasons, then it's going to do what it's supposed to do, right? So the main three things I would say are care, which I would, through my research and in my investigation in this, care, which is associated with thought, it's mind, mentalism. Nonviolence, which I feel is coming from the emotion side of us. That's the, our abilities for empathy, for forward thinking, discernment, thinking before we speak, thinking before we do, using our, that creative ability that we have, understanding when nonviolence, being able to deal with a situation with nonviolence, when that's appropriate. And self-defensive force, which is the action part of this, where if you have to go into self-defensive force using your physical action to manifest something into reality. And, sometimes you don't have to go this far when it's with self-defense, obviously, since you've been watching this whole video, and many situations where maybe you can go thought, emotion, and then stop at action because it isn't, and it's not required for whatever situation. So self-defensive force is the physical action. And I just want to add in with the nonviolence, when people come at you, sometimes you don't have to go into the step of action, but like if somebody's invading your space, you gotta kind of prepare yourself. But, if somebody's like still staying at a distance and they're hollering, stuff at you, obscenities, or calling you fat, or saying you're this, or whatever it is, or insulting you or your mom or whatever, this is just influence. It's influence, and it still is only in the realm of the nonviolence realm until they actually step forward and violate that space, and you can feel their intention of what they're actually going to be doing. That's the discernment part of that. So self-defensive force is important. It's the action step of this. So, when you're using this care, nonviolence, self-defensive force, this doesn't just work for self-defense. It works for all aspects of life. what you do. So that goes into our next three things. Here is thought, emotion, and action in that order. And I talk about this all the time, as some people might know. Thought, emotion, and action. That's where we are thinking about what's happening. We're using our thought, our mind to be like, okay, maybe you got like a list of shit going on, using that thought. Emotion, where you're using the training you have in, the emotion part of your spirit, where you're then making the discernment calls, you're making decisions because you got thought and emotion working together. You're at that stage. So, and then you've got action, which is what then you use to, affect, excuse me, affect the physical reality and manifest a actual thing that happens. So, and again, you can use this with absolutely every single aspect in your life. And I guarantee if you just practice this, you don't have to know anything else, as far as I think. If you understand this information, it doesn't matter whether you believe or care or want to know any of the other things that me or anyone else says. You could throw out every single thing out we say. I wouldn't recommend that. But you could throw that out if you know this stuff and you understand this stuff, how to use it properly, and, be able to live free in whatever it is you're going to do. This is where you start anything. As far as I'm concerned, this is where you start. And that includes knowing how to physically defend yourself. This is the spiritual defense. If you have this background, if you already have these fixings right here, the first steps, then you will naturally, as a fraction of spirit, as a human being, as a creative individual that's manifested in this physical world, you will, by our nature, start to grow from that, even in ways that you don't understand. And I know a lot of people think I'm nuts because this is how I view this kind of thing. But I know that that's the case because I have personal, physical, experience-based proof. I've experienced it personally. I know this is how it works. And certainly, there's other creative methods people get to where they're going, and evolving themselves in these ways, but this is certainly a good one. And I am a difficult one to teach sometimes. So if you're one of those people, you're a very visual learner like I am, and you need it kind of spelled out in a very textbook, scientific, step by step, here is the exact instructions. You take the pot out of the cabinet, you put the water in the pot, you put pasta in the pot, you turn it on to low. You do, those kind of instructions where you can't just go, okay, I'm going to boil water. You have to have like the 20 steps in between. If you're like that, then this is something that will help you get to wherever you're going to go. And if you start with this, I promise you're going to be able to get to the goals that you want in your life, and you're going to start to understand how to defend yourself in spiritual and physical ways, and you're going to start to understand how it's important to know how to do this for yourself and to not justify the reasons why you shouldn't do it. Like, don't justify reasons why society tells us we shouldn't defend ourselves. That's insane. It's insane that we have a society that's trying to train us into thinking that we don't have any God-given inherent rights to defend ourselves. That's insane. It's
And if
fantasy
you
land.
and it starts within yourself, right? Every person knowing their rights and understanding that that it is right to defend oneself, to defend one's rights. And that combination of thought, feeling, and action is where the greatest power, it's in that alignment where the power comes.
Yep.
Yeah.
You know, it's practice. It's practicing a skill. It's getting on a bike and learning how to ride a bike without the training wheels. The thought, emotion, and action. This little paper, you can download it. You can print it out on your computer. This is your training wheels. These are training wheels until you don't need this piece of paper to go back to and refer to, because muscle memory, sense memory is going to pick up. It's gonna, you know, you're going to get it. So I would just give a warning, beware, this is a two-way door. Either the thought is positive and develops into a positive manifestation, or the thought is negative and manifests into a negative result, that being using thought, emotion, and action in that order to result the physical manifestations and result a physical consequence, either positive or negative. Everything a person thinks, feels, and does will shape the person they turn into. And I would say it can actually shape the people around you as well. And as an example, if you were of the mind to always be thinking about the hardship you experience and everything is always against you, then the result will eventually be your continued suffering and will only attract the like-minded who also build that negative perspective. You will be surrounded by it to the point that you get the impression that this is how life is. And this, I see this happen all the time with people. They think that's just how the world is because that's like every single person around them behaves like this. So they're like, oh, I don't know any better. So the thing is, and this is something I've learned, personal experience-based proof. The thing is that person invited it. They invited it because that's what they surrounded themselves with. You know, essentially the person talked to spirit, the big them, even unintentionally, and by producing only negative thoughts and words, and spirit responded by giving you what you asked for. So there's actually a saying we have. People have forgotten these old, you know, housewife idioms that we used to say all the time. Be careful what you wish for. It's not just to, you know, discipline our naughty children. It's to make you think about what you're feeling and doing. So, you know, when you do that, when you have all this negative contention in your life, and that's all you put out, like vitriol into the world, because of whatever situation you're in, that's what you're going to attract. It's just what's going to happen. And you know, like, so that's what you put out. So your high self was like, all right, I guess that's what we're doing now. So
it's disciplining your mind as well as your body and your practice, right, of self-defense, but really noticing your mind and disciplining your thoughts.
Exactly. Yeah. So I wanted to hear your guys' thoughts on any of that and anything you wanted to add into the concept of spiritual self-defense, of what an individual can do.
One thing I've noticed is, you know, you really got to watch out for what I call the spiritual vampires or spiritual bloodsuckers. There's a lot of people out there that haven't developed their own spiritual journey or their own life, and they will just suck off of your energy if you let them. And so there is a self-defense process to that. I think they've talked about it in the Wizard Factory, you know, creating the circle, right? Circle of the Magi, right? Before leaving the house and putting your pepper spray in your pocket, maybe it's not such a bad idea to walk around your car once, or walk around in a circle, or kind of just mentally put up your shield. I'm kind of an open, empathetic person, and it took me a lot of years to realize I pick up other people's emotions. And there's a lot of people out there that will egg you on, or like get involved in a conversation, but they're not really trying to learn anything. They're just trying to see if they can get you frustrated. So they're just messing or manipulating with your energy. And so really got to watch out for that. And I think, to me, the biggest term, or not term, but the biggest tool for that discernment process has been moral relativism. When people give away in various ways that they're very relativistic, that they don't have their own conception, understanding of consciousness, it's not good to waste a lot of time trying to talk to these people and make sense of this. You're not even, they don't even believe in the same reality you believe in. They don't believe there's such thing as God or something divine or something to even be discovered. Then what are we talking about?
Or
So I
right
think
and wrong, right?
it's
That's a
important to
very
watch
simple
out for
one.
the spiritual vampires and the spiritual bloodsuckers and the people out there that are just looking to steal your energy. Don't let them do it.
Well, I think to add to that, some of the flags that you can see with those kind of people are kind of parasitic behavioral patterns. A lot of those people who are so-called um, spiritual vampires, it's like you give an inch and they take a mile. You might share something and this person's like, oh, well, could I have another $20? And they're always coming back. Or some people, if it's not like monetary things, they want a lot of your time and energy. They want to, and they're always calling you. Uh, they can't be with themselves and stuff like that. So, along with watching out for those people, there's certain behavioral patterns that you can also look for. And when I mean parasitic, like they almost need a host, they can't really generate energy of their own. They always have to surround themselves with people. They are takers, not necessarily givers. There's not that equal energy exchange. So I definitely agree with that point that you guys shared. And I think we talked a little bit about it, just basic boundaries when you see certain behaviors like that. Or even like we spoke about earlier, not entering a situation that is going to be dangerous. That's a great way to protect yourself, energetically and physically, spiritually, all the way around. And I guess, I'll mention some tools, some basic tools we all like, smoke, sage, Palo Santo, stuff like that. It's really good at just dispersing a lot of unseen energies. I'll also mention crystals. They actually have repeating geometrical patterns in them that are a lot more stable than our ever-flowing energy. So crystals are a great way to bring something into your field to kind of hold a certain energy so that you can attune with it. And if you're working on all of the inner workings, crystals can also be an additional thing that can help you in your inner practice. So I'll mention that since we're talking about a lot of the internal things.
That's a great point. We didn't even get really too into how to spiritually defend yourself against all them astral critters out there, because religion puts them in like places like angels and demons, but really I think it's just astral critters, and they're messing around and be like, oh yes, I'm an angel. And really it's just some like weird critter out in the astral. And that's a really good point. Understanding and what we just, with the spiritual self-defense stuff that I just read, these are also good things. If you understand these things, you understand not just how to defend yourself, your inner self spiritually from, people who are like psychic vampires who kind of just like feed off of energy because they're like kind of parasitic in their behavior. And physically defending yourself, but also defending yourself from all the weird astral attachments that I personally know, experience-based proof can happen to people. So yeah, I just wanted to throw that in. That's a great point to bring in, is understanding how to do that. And You can also use like smoke and crystals to like defend yourself against a physical person too. So
That is
still
You know,
valid.
those three principles apply as well: distance, timing, and commitment. You
Yes.
know, someone that you have a commitment with, you're willing to think about the timing of when you say things, right?
Yes.
And it is important, the timing of when you say things and how you say things. And it depends on how committed you are, you know, how much care you're going to put into that. And sometimes you need a little distance between things to think things over. I kind of have a standard 3 day thing where if I find myself struggling with something mentally, I like to give myself a full day, up to 3 days, to kind of just let it sink in and get different messages from the subconscious or the ether or the birds flying by, and how I feel mentally and then analytically, and talk to people and to get better answers. So I'd say patience is the other, like when it comes to spiritual stuff, is one of the most powerful tools there are, is patience, and it's the embodiment of love. So
Yes. Absolutely.
and I also wanted to mention whatever is going on in your background there, Brittany. It's beautiful. There's this golden sun coming through in the corner. It's looking really neat.
It's setting now, so it's passing through
Awesome.
some trees and casting a cool little.
I
Yeah,
love
it's
it.
Yeah,
really
that's
pretty.
awesome. Thanks
It looks
It's
for
like
bringing
great.
it.
fire.
It kind of does look like fire. It's not on fire, but I can enjoy the view, I guess we all can.
I wanted to add just this idea in relationships that I believe that reciprocity is a spiritual principle that is a protective principle, and it also informs us about what we can offer, right? You know, in any relationship is, you know, being aware that we have to offer something, but we also shouldn't be so lopsided and the only one giving, and to be alert to the relationships you're in, to look for that reciprocity and that spirit of care, and know what your boundaries are. You know, really think about boundaries and value yourself enough to have them, and to learn the communication skills. So a self-defense is communication, knowing how to communicate, communication skills. And then the other thing that's important is managing fear. So so I just want to mention that.
Yeah, perfect. Managing fear, because all of our root problems, like whatever problem we have, personally, the inner self that stops us from moving forward, I guarantee if you root around there long enough into that particular problem, it's going to be based in fear. And so if you can remove that fear, if you can pick away at that fear, like, why am I really afraid of
Which is
this?
usually facing a fear, right?
Yes, it's
The only way to get it
facing a fear.
dissipate is to face it head on.
Yeah, and I've said this before, like really it's just the fear that comes, it always comes down to fear. It always comes down to the fear of pain, suffering, and death. People are subconsciously terrified of this because they're not emotional adults and they haven't really picked apart, oh, why am I afraid of spiders? Oh, why am I afraid of heights? Oh, why am I afraid of defending myself? Oh, why am I afraid of, opening up a book that's maybe the book says the Satanic Bible. Like I can't open the Satanic Bible and read it because it's going to provoke demons. I mean, why am I afraid of this? I mean, I just had somebody tell me that I shouldn't mess around with tarot cards as if that's what you do with them, because it's going to like provoke demonic possession and it's necromancy. And I'm like, all right, this is a fear-based response, and everything that triggers us in this way that like has a where you're not thinking, it's going straight to emotion. If you have a trigger and it's an immediate emotional response without any thought before that emotional response, there's a reason why it's thought, emotion, and action in that order. But if you're being triggered, it's because you're allowing an emotional response to take place before thought, before you use your mind. And it's a fear-based response. It's always a fear-based response.
And then on the other kind of side of the coin is that we have a built-in physiological response of defense. You know, the fight or flight response is designed, it's built into our physiology, and it's designed so that the thinking can be suppressed for the moment, because if you think too long, sometimes then you're dead, you know. So there's also that is why the training is so important, because that is where you start to face the fears and manage your anxieties and understand the, you know, build the muscle memory and the responses, so that you know what to do and you're able to control the reactions, you know, but also to value and recognize our natural responses and the cortisol and adrenaline that pumps through our body that helps us give us more power, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Being quick on your feet, and training is definitely, if you are in a position to train with yourself, or preferably with somebody who knows what they're doing and understands at least the basics of what we went over with spiritual self-defense, then you're on the right track. You know, but yeah, you know, flight or fight is something we definitely all have ingrained in us naturally. And like I said, I'm not trained in any kind of real fighting style or anything, but I will, you don't cross my physical personal space, because you're going to have a problem with me. You know, like most of my training really is verbal, where I'm like, if you don't get out of my hospital room, I'm going to fucking throw you out. You know, so most of my self-defense has been trained just accidentally by being in situations with people who usually wouldn't dare cross that physical line. So I've been able to use the power of my voice to be like, you don't want to cross my personal space, because people have also learned around me not to do that. And that's another thing. When you set your boundaries in a position and you commit to this, and you make this is my boundary, period. It doesn't move. It's not flexible. I'm not willing to compromise on my boundary, where I'm drawing my line, where my border is. That's acceptable, and who's acceptable to be within that border, that boundary. Yeah. Other people will, whether they understand the position you're in or who you are, or maybe they're a stranger or whatever it is, they will subconsciously, even on a subconscious level, people will pick up how far they can go with you before they try something. And I promise, you know, there are people, of course, there are people who are going to cross that line, because you got a bunch of dumb animals running around out there who don't understand not to violate our inherent rights. But most people, they don't have, you know, the moxie to cross that line. They just don't have it in them, because they're being conditioned to be not that. So yeah, so I wanted to leave it there for me and see if anybody else. You're muted, Leslie.
Sorry about that. I sent a little message in the chat, but I need to duck out. I'm late for another meeting and I want to make an appearance there. So I apologize.
Yeah, no problem.
I'm going to head out.
No problem. So I just wanted to thank you, Leslie, so much for being here. And I just wanted to do a quick round with everybody. I know Leslie has to go. So we know her stuff. So with Brittany and Chris, I wanted to give a chance for them to talk about the work they do and the work that they want to support and whatever they want to put out there.
Thanks, Sarah. Well, I said my website, EndEvil.life. I really love working with the One Great Work Warriors, and we're doing an episode this coming Thursday that's called Talking Shitcoms. and we're going to talk about sitcoms and the moral relativity and the degeneration that's going on in Hollywood and on the screens. And so, yeah, check me out on Thursdays. The End Evil podcast is every Thursday, 6 p.m. Pacific. That's 9 p.m. Eastern, and I think that's 8 p.m. Central. And I do want to keep going on the self-defense thing. I started a little class once before called Mind, Body, Spirit, which I still plan on reviving at some point. So if folks are interested or want to talk to me more about self-defense or curious about where I'm going with that, go ahead and hit me up on my email. You can find my email address on the contact page on EndEvil.life, or chrisjantzen.com is another way to get at me. So thanks so much for having me, guys. I really appreciated being here and hearing your thoughts and kind of letting this whole self-defense thing come out in a more organized way. I've been taking in so much learning. It's really nice to start sharing it with people that hopefully can receive it and do something with it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for
Awesome
joining
job,
us.
Chris. Seriously, I love the topic idea. It's always fun to talk about stuff like this, and it's nice to hear a man's perspective on everything. And I appreciate you coming out to talk with us.
Yeah. And Brittany or Chris, did you have any last thoughts you wanted to add in? I think
we shared it. I feel we did pretty well. I shared some links in our private chat here in the Zoom meeting. If you feel like you want to put them with the show, feel free. It's just some links to a couple people that do some of the types of martial art self-defense training I'm talking about. A link to finding those sticks if you want to buy them on eBay. And I'd also recommend people check out small circle trapping. It's a very interesting thing they don't allow in some of the fighting you see, like in the ring fights, but it's a super important aspect to self-defense, is being able to put somebody into submission. And there's a lot of different ways to do that you don't see in traditional fighting on TV. So don't think martial arts is self-defense. They're two different things.
Yeah.
They obviously overlap, but and then these, I keep these in my car, and getting on an interview or a long drive, might as well be working out your hands.
Yep. I'm just adding that link here so we can add them in later. So yes.
Last thing I'll say is a lot of training can be done in your mind. This is something my self-defense teacher has told me over and over. He's like, the stuff I'm showing you, try to do it in your mind, like when you're waiting in line or driving. And at first it seemed kind of silly, but the more I've done it and I've thought about how Olympic people do that, they study videos and then they visualize. So I think it's really good to watch videos, practice doing something in the physical world, and then visualize yourself doing it mentally.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for listening. Thank you, Chris, for joining us. And everybody, and Leslie and Brittany, they came in and there's always here too, and supporting this great project of the Girls Club, which is the greatest name we could have ever called it. So thank you, everybody, for watching. Check out the links, check out Chris's work, go and show him some support, go watch him on Thursdays, and just consider what we've said and use your God-given inherent rights that you have to learn and grow and defend yourself. Thank you, guys, and we'll see you next month. Bye.